The city was alive with its usual hum, lights flickering like distant stars against the skyline. But inside the towering walls of his penthouse, Alexander Monroe felt the silence pressing in heavier than any deadline or boardroom confrontation. He had left the office earlier than usual, a rare decision dictated by a sudden whim, or perhaps by a deeper, unacknowledged longing he refused to name. The elevators carried him down in quiet, the mirrored walls reflecting a man who had it all: power, wealth, influence. Yet, tonight, as he stepped through the familiar doorway, Alexander realized that perhaps having everything didn't mean possessing what mattered most. The first thing that struck him was the scent, faintly floral, mixed with a hint of lemon. Polish, a cleanliness that should have been comforting, but instead carried an unfamiliar weight. And then he saw her, a figure crouched on the marble floor, rag in hand, moving with a grace that seemed effortless yet deliberate. It wasn't the housekeeper herself who caused his chest to tighten. It was the small boy beside her. Julian, his son, his youngest and brightest, wobbled on a pair of lightweight crutches that contrasted starkly with the smooth, gleaming floors. Every movement required concentration, every step a quiet triumph. And there he was, pushing a damp cloth across the polished marble, his tiny arms trembling. Determination etched into his features in a way that made Alexander's heart twist. "Dad?" The boy's voice, soft yet firm, carried a mix of surprise and worry. Julian's wide brown eyes, glistening in the soft glow of the chandelier, looked up and held him captive. "You're home early." It should have been a simple greeting, a moment of joy, but Alexander felt a pang of guilt so sharp that it made his knees weak. For months, years even, he had believed that his absence was justified by success, that money, connections, and carefully orchestrated schedules could substitute for love. Yet here, in the quiet of his own home, Julian's presence was a mirror reflecting everything he had missed. "Easy there, little hero," said the housekeeper, her voice gentle, almost like a whisper of reassurance. She looked at Alexander. For the briefest moment, her expression a mixture of pride and caution, then returned her attention to the boy. "You've already done so much, Julian. Why don't you rest a bit?" Julian shook his head stubbornly. "I can help. Teams don't quit, remember." His small hands gripped the crutches tightly, his determination unyielding. There was no complaint, no whine, only persistence, the kind that makes you simultaneously proud and painfully aware of what could have been. Alexander took a cautious step forward, his polished shoes silent against the marble, yet every footfall echoed in his mind like a reminder of time lost. He noticed the faint bruise on Julian's elbow, the way his little fingers trembled with effort, and something inside him shifted. The walls of the mansion, lined with priceless art and lavish furniture, suddenly felt hollow. All the wealth in the world could not protect him from the fear that had gripped his son, nor could it compensate for the countless evenings he had spent absent. Believing that success was enough, Julian's gaze met his, flickering between delight and apprehension, as if measuring whether this unexpected visitor, this father, would smile, scold, or disappear again. Alexander swallowed hard, his throat tight. He had no words, only the overwhelming surge of emotions that had lain dormant beneath the polished surface of his life. "You're helping?" he finally asked, his voice betraying the astonishment he felt. The housekeeper, Grace, smiled, faintly, not proud or boastful, but quietly, as if the boy's triumphs were the only rewards that mattered. "We've been practicing. He's stronger than anyone gives him credit for," she said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Julian's forehead. "He just needed someone to believe in him." Alexander's eyes welled, a rare vulnerability, breaking through the veneer of the billionaire image he had cultivated for decades. And in that moment, Julian's resilience, his small but mighty courage, struck Alexander more profoundly than any business deal, any accolade, or any accumulation of power ever had. The child's smile, unwavering and radiant despite the struggle, was a beacon, illuminating not just the room, but the cracks in his own heart he had long ignored. The boy's hands wobbled slightly as he pushed the rag across the floor, a simple motion that somehow carried the weight of months of secret practice, dedication, and hope. "See? I can do it," Julian whispered, and in his voice was a quiet triumph that echoed louder than the city outside. Alexander took another step, closer now, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine the possibilities, the moments he could reclaim, the love he could show, the father he might finally become. His mind raced with questions and regrets, but one thing became abundantly clear: he could no longer stand by, a mere observer in his own life. That night, as the chandelier's light danced across the marble, Alexander realized that true wealth was not measured in dollars or assets. It was measured in moments like this, moments of courage, resilience, and unwavering hope. Julian's tiny hands gripping crutches, his determination shining in his eyes, and Grace's quiet guidance had reminded him of a fundamental truth: he had been given a chance to make things right, to rebuild trust, and to witness the extraordinary strength of a child's spirit. And so, standing at the threshold of the room, Alexander Monroe, billionaire and titan of industry, felt a transformation begin. Not in the markets or boardrooms, not in the contracts or investments that had defined his life, but here in the gentle sway of determination and love. In the quiet victory of a small boy on purple crutches, he glimpsed the real meaning of legacy, and he knew that he could no longer fail. The night stretched on, the city below oblivious to the quiet miracle unfolding in a Manhattan penthouse. Alexander took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift slightly from his shoulders. The first step toward redemption, he realized, was simple yet profound: to be present, to believe, and to stand by the one who had never stopped believing in himself. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Monroe penthouse, painting the marble floors in warm golds and soft whites. Alexander awoke with a rare sense of anticipation, a feeling he had not experienced in years, not since the early days of Julian's birth, when every coo and giggle had filled the house with promise. Now, as he moved quietly through the rooms, careful not to wake the boy or Grace, he realized that last night had shifted something inside him, an awakening that demanded action, presence, and dedication. He found Julian sitting on the plush rug in the corner of the living room, crutches, leaning against the couch, engrossed in stacking colorful blocks into a precarious tower, each piece balanced carefully atop the other, a miniature testament to patience and perseverance. The boy glanced up and smiled, the kind of innocent, genuine smile that seemed to radiate warmth like sunlight through glass. Alexander felt a lump in his throat. He had missed so many smiles like this, countless, precious, irretrievable moments, and he vowed silently that he would never allow distance or distraction to steal them again. Grace, entering from the kitchen with a tray of breakfast, glanced at Alexander and offered a polite nod. There was no need for words. She had witnessed the transformation beginning in the previous night, and she understood that the man standing before her was no longer the same distant figure who had left the house so often without a backward glance. Alexander returned the nod, a silent acknowledgement of trust and teamwork that had quietly begun to form between the three of them. "Good morning, Julian," Alexander said, his voice steady but warm. "Did you sleep well?" The boy's eyes lit up, the sparkle of mischief and joy mingling with his usual determination. "I slept like a superhero," he declared, tapping his chest proudly. "I'm ready to train today." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Alexander found himself smiling, a natural, unforced expression that hadn't appeared in his face for a long time. Grace placed the breakfast tray on the small table beside Julian. "He's been looking forward to this all week," she said gently. "We have a few new exercises to try today. I think he'll surprise even himself." She glanced at Alexander, her eyes hinting at an unspoken message. This boy had already faced challenges most adults would crumble under, and yet he never gave up. Alexander knelt beside Julian, placing a careful hand on his shoulder. "Do you want me to help you today?" he asked, his tone tentative but filled with genuine interest. Julian's eyes widened in surprise, then shimmered with delight. "Really, you'll help me?" "I will," Alexander confirmed, feeling a strange thrill of responsibility, pride, and humility all at once. He realized in that instant that helping Julian was not merely a gesture of parental duty, it was an opportunity to witness courage, to nurture resilience, and to learn from the most remarkable teacher he had ever known, his son. The morning unfolded with small victories. Each stretch, each balance, each careful step was celebrated with laughter and applause. Alexander watched, mesmerized, as Julian gradually strengthened. His confidence growing with every repetition. Grace guided them with gentle encouragement, her quiet wisdom shaping the exercises with patience and precision. Together, the trio formed a rhythm, a synergy born of trust, hope, and shared purpose. At one point, Julian stumbled slightly, the crutches slipping under him. For a heartbeat, Alexander felt panic surge through his chest. But before he could react, Julian steadied himself, a determined grin on his face. "I've got this, Dad," he said, his voice firm yet full of warmth. Alexander's heart swelled. Here was a boy who had faced so much yet remained unbroken, whose strength was not only physical but emotional, a beacon of persistence and courage. He realized that in witnessing Julian's journey, he too was learning a lesson about resilience and belief. Later that day, Alexander found himself alone with Grace in the kitchen, a rare moment of quiet reflection. "He's incredible," Alexander said, shaking his head in awe. I can't believe how strong he is. I've been away for so long. But seeing him like this, it's humbling." Grace smiled softly. "Strength isn't always about what you see. It's about what's inside, the courage to try, to fail, and to try again. Julian has that in abundance. And now, you do too, in your own way." Alexander nodded, absorbing her words. He realized that the lessons he had learned in boardrooms, in negotiations, and in the pursuit of wealth were pale in comparison to the lessons Julian was teaching him. Patience, perseverance, empathy, unconditional support, these were the true measures of strength. The day had begun with small steps, yet Alexander felt as if he had taken monumental strides in understanding what it meant to be a father, a mentor, and a guardian of hope. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the city in hues of rose and amber, Alexander sat beside Julian on the couch. The boy leaned against him, crutches propped neatly against the armrest, and whispered, "Thanks, Dad, for being here." Alexander felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "I'm here, Julian." "Always," he replied, his voice steady but thick with emotion. He understood, with perfect clarity, that presence mattered more than promises, that love was measured in time, attention, and care. As night fell, and the city lights flickered to life below, Alexander found himself reflecting on the day's lessons. Julian's courage had ignited a spark within him, a desire to be better, to act differently, to prioritize what truly mattered. It was no longer about power or money or accolades. It was about moments like these, quiet, unassuming, but transformative in their depth and significance. In the days that followed, Alexander continued to involve himself in Julian's journey, witnessing each small triumph with growing admiration. He began to understand that life's most profound victories often unfolded in silence, away from public attention, and that the true meaning of success was not in the achievements visible to the world but in the love, support, and guidance offered to those we care about most. And so, as the city outside buzzed with ambition and activity, inside the Monroe penthouse, a father and son, guided by a quiet but powerful mentor, were reshaping their world one step, one smile, one courageous act at a time. The following week began like any other. Yet Alexander felt a tension beneath the surface, a quiet anticipation, as if life itself was preparing him for a lesson he could not yet comprehend. He arrived home one evening, earlier than usual, carrying a briefcase filled with documents and ideas, a symbol of the empire he had built. Yet as he stepped into the familiar warmth of his penthouse, he immediately sensed that the evening would unfold differently. Julian was waiting in the living room, a determined expression etched across his small face. He had spent the afternoon practicing exercises Grace had taught him, moving with a grace that had become almost second nature. But tonight, something was different. The boy's smile was tinged with worry, a subtle tension that Alexander could feel like a pulse. His crutches leaned against the couch, and Julian's hands trembled slightly as he balanced on one leg, preparing for a maneuver that even Grace had cautioned him about. "What's going on, Julian?" Alexander asked gently, kneeling beside his son. I want to try something new, Julian said, his voice firm yet quivering. I want to climb the stairs by myself, just once. I've been practicing. I can do it. Alexander felt his heart tighten. The staircase was tall, elegant, and imposing, its polished wooden steps gleaming under the chandelier's light. He knew the risks. One wrong step, one slip, and the consequences could be severe. Yet he also saw the determination in Julian's eyes, the quiet courage that had grown with each small victory over the past weeks. This was more than a physical challenge. It was a test of the boy's spirit, a moment that could define his confidence and sense of independence. Grace appeared behind him, her presence calm but alert. It's ambitious, Julian, she said softly, but I believe in you. If Alexander supports you, we can do it together. Alexander swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing against him. He knew this moment required more than caution, it required trust. Trust in Julian's strength, in his own patience, and in the unspoken bond that had begun to form between father and son. I'll be right beside you, he said, his voice steady. We'll do this together. Julian's eyes lit up, a mixture of excitement and nervousness shimmering in their depths. He took a deep breath, his small chest rising and falling with determination. With Alexander on one side and Grace on the other, he planted one foot on the first step, testing his balance. The crutches hovered for a moment, a safety net he might not need but refused to discard entirely. Then, with a steady push, he lifted himself to the second step. Alexander held his breath, his hands hovering, ready to catch if needed, yet resisting the urge to intervene. This was Julian's moment, a chance to prove to himself that obstacles, no matter how daunting, could be overcome with courage, focus, and support. Step by step, Julian ascended, his tiny frame swaying but resolute. Each movement was deliberate, measured, a testament to the countless hours of practice, the patient guidance of Grace, and the unwavering determination that defined him. Alexander's chest tightened with emotion. He was witnessing not just a physical feat, but a transformation, a child stepping into his own power, defying fear and embracing possibility. Halfway up, Julian faltered. One leg trembled, his crutches slipping slightly. The room froze, time suspended in that heartbeat of tension. Alexander stepped forward instinctively, but Grace's hand on his arm restrained him. Let him try, she whispered. He's ready. Julian's face flushed with effort, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. I can do this, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else, summoning every ounce of strength. He steadied himself, pushed against the step, and moved upward again. Alexander felt tears prick at his eyes, not of fear, but of pride and awe. When Julian finally reached the top step, he let out a triumphant laugh, a sound that filled the room with a brilliance far brighter than any chandelier. He stood there, small but monumental, and looked at Alexander and Grace with a beaming smile. I did it, he exclaimed, breathless but elated. Alexander rushed to him, enveloping his son in a hug that felt both protective and reverent. You did it, Julian. I'm so proud of you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. In that embrace, Alexander felt a shift inside himself, a realization that true success was not measured in achievements alone, but in courage, resilience, and the moments we stand together in triumph. Grace smiled, quietly stepping back to allow. Then their moment. He's stronger than he realizes, she said softly, her eyes reflecting both pride and relief. And now he knows he can face anything, as long as he believes in himself. The rest of the evening was filled with laughter, celebration, and quiet reflection. Alexander realized that he had been given a profound gift, not merely witnessing Julian's growth, but participating in it, guiding it, and learning from it. He understood that life's most significant lessons were often delivered, not in grand gestures or accolades, but in moments of courage, determination, and shared triumph. As night fell and the city's lights glittered like 1,000 tiny beacons of possibility, Alexander sat beside Julian, reflecting on the day's events. He realized that the boy's bravery had illuminated a path for him, as well a path toward becoming not just a father, but a mentor, a supporter, and a witness to the extraordinary strength that lies within the human spirit. In the quiet of the penthouse, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew challenges lay ahead, obstacles that would test both him and Julian. Yet he also knew that together, they could face anything. The journey had only just begun, but the first steps had been taken, and with each step, they were creating a legacy not of wealth, but of courage, resilience, and unwavering love. That night, as Julian slept peacefully, Alexander sat alone by the window, looking out at the sprawling city. He whispered a promise to himself and to his son that he would be there, fully present, for every challenge and every victory. He had learned that the true measure of life was not in power or possessions, but in the moments when love, trust, and courage converged. And tonight, those moments had reshaped everything. A week later, the city seemed to pulse with an energy that mirrored Alexander's own growing anticipation. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm of Manhattan traffic and distant sirens, a tension lingered, subtle but undeniable, as if the universe was preparing another test for both him and Julian. Alexander had grown accustomed to small victories, the balance achieved, the steps climbed, but he sensed that the coming challenge would demand more than practice or patience. It would demand courage, trust, and a willingness to confront fears that had long been buried. That evening, as he entered the penthouse, he immediately noticed an unusual quiet. Julian was seated near the grand window, crutches leaning against the couch, his gaze distant. Grace stood a few feet away, her expression serious yet calm. There was a sense of anticipation, almost a charge in the air, and Alexander felt a flutter of unease. "Dad," Julian said softly, not turning immediately. "Tonight, I want to try something different, something bigger." His words carried weight, the kind that made Alexander sit up a little straighter. "I want to walk across the balcony by myself, just once, with you watching." The balcony. Alexander's chest tightened. The balcony overlooked the city, high above the streets. That had always felt distant, insignificant, and yet suddenly frighteningly close. He could picture the marble railing, the drop beyond it, the possibility of failure, and yet he also saw the determination in Julian's eyes, the same courage that had propelled him up the stairs days ago. Grace stepped forward, her hand resting gently on Alexander's arm. "He's been preparing for this," she said softly, "but he needs both of you, strength, support, and faith. He's ready for the challenge, but he must feel your confidence as well." Alexander swallowed hard, the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. He realized that this moment was about more than balance or physical skill. It was about trust, about teaching Julian that he could face fear without crutches. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. "Julian," Alexander began, his voice firm but gentle, "I'll be right beside you. Step by step, you're not alone." Julian's eyes lit up, reflecting both excitement and apprehension. "I know, Dad. I've been practicing. I can do this." His small hand reached for Alexander's, their fingers intertwining in a grip that conveyed more than words ever could: trust, love, and an unspoken promise that they would face this together. The boy carefully stepped onto the balcony, the crutches left behind as a symbol of faith in his own strength. The wind whispered softly, brushing against his hair and the folds of his shirt, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city below. Alexander followed closely, placing a steadying hand on Julian's back, offering support without interference. Grace moved slightly behind, her presence quiet but reassuring, a safety net of encouragement. Step by step, Julian moved forward, each movement deliberate and precise. The balcony, once an intimidating expanse of steel and stone, transformed into a stage for courage, a platform where fear and determination collided. Alexander's heart pounded, a mix of awe and anxiety coursing through his veins. Each inch Julian advanced was a victory over doubt, a testament to resilience and persistence. Halfway across, a gust of wind caught Julian slightly off balance. For a moment, he froze, eyes wide, chest rising and falling rapidly. Alexander felt a surge of fear, but he held his ground, his voice steady. "You've got this, Julian. One step at a time. I'm right here." The boy exhaled slowly, drawing on a deep reservoir of strength. With a renewed effort, he continued forward, placing one foot after another with precision, confidence growing with each successful step. Alexander marveled at the courage radiating from his son, a quiet but powerful energy that seemed to illuminate the balcony, the penthouse, and even his own heart. When Julian finally reached the end, he turned, a triumphant grin lighting up his face. "I did it. I really did it," he exclaimed, his voice ringing with exhilaration. Alexander's chest tightened, tears brimming in his eyes. He knelt to embrace his son, feeling the small but mighty heartbeat beneath his chest, a rhythm that spoke of determination, perseverance, and unyielding courage. Grace smiled, stepping back, but clapping softly. "He's extraordinary," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "And he has something even more powerful than physical strength. He has belief. Belief in himself and those who care for him." That night, as the city sprawled endlessly below, Alexander sat with Julian, reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had undertaken together. He realized that life's most profound lessons were often delivered in moments of vulnerability, moments when fear seemed insurmountable, and moments that demanded trust, courage, and unwavering determination. Julian had shown him that obstacles were not walls, but stepping stones, and that true strength came from facing challenges head-on with belief in oneself and the support of loved ones. Alexander understood, in that quiet moment, that his role as a father had shifted. He was no longer merely an observer, a distant provider. He was a mentor, a guide, a participant in the journey of growth and resilience. Julian's bravery had illuminated the path, revealing that courage was contagious, that hope could inspire, and that even the smallest hearts could carry extraordinary strength. As Julian drifted into sleep that night, exhausted but elated, Alexander remained awake, staring out over the city lights. He whispered a vow to himself, a promise that he would never again underestimate the power of presence, encouragement, and unwavering support. The journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, unexpected twists, and moments of doubt, but he now understood the essence of courage, resilience, and love. And in that understanding, Alexander Monroe realized the most important truth of all: life's greatest victories are not measured by wealth or power, but by the moments in which we rise together, face fear, and discover the extraordinary strength that lies within us all. The following morning brought with it a calm that belied the tension Alexander could feel in the air. The city outside continued its relentless pace, lights flickering in office towers and streets alive with motion. But inside the penthouse, there was a quiet anticipation, a sense that today would demand more than they had faced before. Julian was awake early, as always, moving with a quiet determination that had become a constant in Alexander's life. But there was something different in his eyes, a mix of excitement and apprehension, as if he knew that today a new challenge awaited him, one that would test not only his courage but the bond he shared with his father. Alexander entered the living room to find Julian balancing on his crutches, near the large window overlooking the city. Grace was nearby, a reassuring presence, her voice calm but encouraging. "Today, we're going to try something new," she said softly. "It's a test of both strength and trust. Are you ready?" Julian nodded, a resolute expression on his face. "I'm ready. I've been waiting for this." Alexander felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. He knew that this exercise would push Julian to his limits. It wasn't just about physical skill. It was about facing fear, embracing uncertainty, and discovering the inner reserves of courage that had always existed but had rarely been tested. Alexander also realized that he would need to remain composed, to provide guidance without taking control, allowing his son to experience triumph on his own terms. The plan was simple yet daunting. Grace had prepared a series of movements that involved navigating the narrow, polished hallways of the penthouse, stepping over small obstacles, and maintaining balance in ways that Julian had practiced, but never under such real-world conditions. It was a simulation of life's unpredictability, a challenge that would require focus, patience, and unwavering determination. As Julian prepared, Alexander knelt beside him. "Remember, it's okay to feel nervous. he said gently. "You've trained for this, and you have both Grace and me right here with you. Take it step by step and trust yourself." Julian's face lit with determination. "I trust you, Dad," he said, his small hand gripping Alexander's firmly. In that moment, Alexander felt a surge of emotion, a profound realization that trust was as vital a part of courage as the strength to take the next step. The first steps were cautious, measured, but confident. Julian moved slowly, his crutches hovering just above the floor, ready to provide support if needed. Grace and Alexander flanked him, offering encouragement, guidance, and reassurance, but allowing him the autonomy to navigate the challenge himself. Each movement was a triumph, a testament to the hours of practice, the patience, and the quiet determination that had become a hallmark of Julian's character. Midway through the course, Julian stumbled slightly, a momentary imbalance that sent a ripple of tension through the room. Alexander's instinct was to rush forward, to steady him, but he restrained himself, remembering Grace's words that growth and courage were born in moments like this. When the decision to persevere outweighed the fear of falling, Julian paused, drawing a deep breath, and then continued, his movements steadying as his confidence grew. Alexander watched, awestruck, as his son's determination transformed fear into strength, uncertainty into focus. Each step was a victory, not just over the physical challenge, but over the invisible barriers of doubt and hesitation that life often imposes. Finally, Julian reached the end of the hall, his face flushed with effort, eyes shining with triumph. "I did it," he exclaimed, the words bursting forth with a joy that filled the room with warmth and light. Alexander rushed forward, embracing his son with a mix of pride, relief, and awe. In that moment, the walls of the penthouse seemed to fade, leaving only the bond between father and son, strengthened by trust, courage, and shared triumph. Grace smiled, stepping back, her eyes reflecting pride and admiration. "He's extraordinary," she said softly, "and he has learned something even more important today, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it." Alexander held Julian close, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath his chest, a rhythm that mirrored determination, resilience, and unyielding hope. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "You've taught me more than I could ever teach you." That night, as Julian slept, Alexander remained awake, reflecting on the day's events. He realized that life's most profound lessons were often delivered in moments of challenge and vulnerability, moments when fear and uncertainty collided with determination and love. Julian's courage had illuminated a path not just for himself, but for Alexander, a path toward becoming a father who was present, supportive, and capable of nurturing the extraordinary potential within his child. In the days that followed, Alexander noticed a transformation not only in Julian, but in himself. He began to approach life differently, embracing challenges with patience, empathy, and resilience. He found joy in small victories, inspiration in perseverance, and a profound sense of purpose in guiding and witnessing Julian's growth. The bond between father and son deepened, strengthened by shared experiences, trust, and mutual admiration. Alexander understood that wealth and power could not create these moments, only presence, patience, and unwavering support could. Julian had taught him that life's greatest triumphs were often hidden in ordinary moments, waiting to be discovered by those willing to embrace courage, face fear, and believe in themselves. As the city lights shimmered outside the penthouse windows, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. He knew challenges lay ahead, unpredictable and demanding, but he also knew that together, he and Julian could face anything. Each step, each small victory, was a building block in a legacy not measured in wealth, but in courage, resilience, and love. And so, the journey continued, a testament to the extraordinary strength of the human spirit, the power of trust and belief, and the unwavering bond between a father and his son, a bond that would inspire and endure, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The following evening, a sense of anticipation hung in the air like electricity. Alexander had spent days observing Julian's progress, marveling at the boy's determination, resilience, and growing confidence. Yet tonight felt different. There was an unspoken tension, a feeling that this evening would demand more than practice, more than patience. It would require courage, faith, and a willingness to confront fears that had always lingered quietly in the background. Julian sat in the center of the living room, crutches set aside, his small hands clasped tightly. In his lap, Grace knelt nearby, her eyes calm and encouraging, her presence a steadying force. Alexander stood at the threshold, watching, feeling a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. This was the culmination of weeks of effort, of challenges faced, of obstacles overcome, but the final test lay ahead. And it was one that would define not only Julian's spirit, but Alexander's understanding of love, courage, and fatherhood. "Tonight, we try the full course," Grace said softly, her voice carrying the weight of quiet authority. "Julian, you've trained for this. It's about everything we've worked on: balance, focus, trust. And remember, Alexander, your role is to guide, not to carry him. Let him discover his strength." Julian's eyes shone with determination. "I'm ready," he whispered. "I want to do this." Alexander swallowed hard, feeling the gravity of the moment pressing on him. He knew this was more than a physical challenge. It was a test of resilience, a lesson in trust, and a defining moment for their bond. He moved closer, kneeling beside Julian, and placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "I believe in you," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "I know you can do this." Julian took a deep breath. Standing tall, despite the small tremor in his legs, he stepped forward, navigating a series of obstacles that Grace had carefully placed to simulate real-life challenges. The boy moved deliberately, each step measured, each movement a testament to the courage he had nurtured over weeks of practice. Alexander followed closely, a silent pillar of support, offering guidance only when necessary. Halfway through the course, Julian paused. His face was flushed with effort, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. The next obstacle was taller, more demanding than anything he had attempted before. Alexander felt a surge of fear, a parent's instinct to protect, but he remembered Grace's words, and he resisted the urge to intervene. This was Julian's moment, his opportunity to prove to himself the strength he had cultivated, the courage he had claimed through perseverance. "I can do this," Julian whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He lifted one foot, then the other, moving steadily over the obstacle. His balance wavered for a heartbeat, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Alexander's heart pounded, not with fear, but with awe and admiration. Each careful step was more than a physical movement. It was a triumph of spirit, a declaration that determination and belief could overcome fear. When Julian finally cleared the obstacle, a victorious smile spread across his face. He looked at Alexander, his eyes bright with exhilaration. "I did it, Dad. I really did it." Alexander rushed forward, enveloping his son in a hug that spoke of pride, relief, and profound love. "You did it, Julian," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. You've shown me what true courage looks like." Grace stepped back, her smile radiant. "He's extraordinary," she said softly, "and he has discovered something important. Strength is not about avoiding challenges. It's about facing them, believing in yourself, and knowing you are never alone." The night continued with laughter, celebration, and quiet reflection. Alexander realized that life's most profound victories were not measured in wealth, power, or accolades, but in moments like these, moments of courage, trust, and love, shared and nurtured together. He understood that being present, supporting, and believing in Julian had transformed both their lives. As the city lights shimmered beyond the penthouse windows, Alexander sat with Julian, reflecting on the journey they had undertaken. The boy's resilience had illuminated a path for him, as well, a path toward becoming not just a father, but a mentor, a guide, and a source of unwavering support. Each challenge had been an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to embrace the extraordinary potential within his son and within himself. Julian leaned against Alexander, exhausted but elated, his face radiant with accomplishment. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered, "for believing in me." Alexander felt tears prick his eyes. "No, Julian," he said softly, "thank you. You've taught me how to be a better father, a better person, and how to see the strength inside both of us." That night, As Julian drifted into a peaceful sleep, Alexander gazed out at the sprawling city below, its lights twinkling like countless tiny beacons of hope. He whispered a vow to himself and his son that he would never again let work, distractions, or fear pull him away from the moments that truly mattered. The journey had been long, challenging, and filled with uncertainty, but it had also been transformative, inspiring, and filled with love. Alexander Monroe understood now that life's greatest victories were not measured in money or status, but in courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds we build with those we love. Julian's journey had not only strengthened the boy, it had awakened a new purpose in him, a clarity that success is defined by the moments we share, the challenges we overcome, and the love we give and receive. As the penthouse fell silent, Alexander sat with a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had reached a pivotal moment, but it was only the beginning. Together, he and Julian had discovered the extraordinary strength within themselves, the power of belief, and the transformative nature of love and trust. And as the night deepened, Alexander knew with certainty that no challenge, no obstacle, and no fear could ever diminish the lessons they had learned, the bond they had forged, or the legacy of courage and hope they would carry forward together.